This is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmala. And this week we have a wonderful program about Maaser Kesofim. We will have with us Rabbi Yosef Fleishman from Yerushalayim, from London, Rabbi Katz, and a great expert on Tzedakah, also from Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Avrohom Chaim Feuer, who actually wrote the Sefer for Art Scroll on Tzedakah. Rabbi Katz, our guest from London, just completed a Sefer on Tzedakah as well. And they'll be discussing tuition. Can you pay tuition for Maaser? Can you support a son-in-law? Can you pay your shul membership? Can you, a fundraiser? Your son's school or your daughter's school says, for the building fund, can that come from Maaser? Aliyos, mafte yaina, you bought it, now you will say, can I pay for Maaser? Can I pay for it from Maaser? All the halachas of Kadima and Tzedakah. Somebody knocks on your door and he says, I'm from Aniyei Eretz Yisrael. I come before everybody. Is that true? Is it just a minig? Is it just an eitzah taiva? These and many other answers that you struggle with, you'll hear on today's program. Very important. This will be pure halacha, very little hashkafa in this week's program. I would like to announce, by the way, 2 weeks ago's riddle. Last week we did not have one, but 2 weeks ago riddle will be at the end of the program, and we have a winner from out of state, Columbus, Ohio. Very interesting answer. This week, we'll give you two riddles. First one, it says, V'yato Yisrael, ma Hashem aleikecha shoyel mi'machkim liyira es Hashem aleikecha, yiras Hashem. And the Gemara says in Shabbos, kasi reisha, cover your head, kiechi titahavi aloch imsa d'shemaya, cover your head. When you walk around, your hair blowing in the wind, hair head uncovered. It's a type of a kalas reish, sense of freedom. Cover your head. It shows that there's something greater than you that transcends you. That's what the makar of a yarmulke. So the question is, why don't girls wear yarmulkes? Why do they go with an uncovered head? Even though among the Sephardim there are opinions that say that women do cover their hair, and among Sephardim Shachranim, but I personally have never seen it by the Sephardim, the ones I've seen. And Ashkenazim certainly. So why isn't there a chiyuv Yerushalayim of kasi reishach by a woman as well? I'll tell you an amusing story. They say over that the Fundraisers Rav once had a friar donor who said, Rabbi, I'll give $1 million to a yeshiva as long as you establish at one that they don't wear yarmulkes. And Fundraisers Rav took it from him, and supposedly this is a story I heard over. He opened up a girls' school. But the question is, why don't girls really have to cover their head? That's one question. And here's another question. And the Gemara in Bracha says, when the man came down from heaven, Amad Moshe v'tiken birchas hazan. The Gemara daf Memches on Beis. So you see that the Yidden benched birchas hamazon after achilas hamazon. So here's the question. The Gemara says in Brachas and Daf Nun Aleph, and I think the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Pei Dalet paskins this way as well, that after mazon leaves your belly, it's nisakel hamazon, it's digested, you don't make a birchas hamazon. How many minutes is it? I don't know, someplace between 70 and 80 minutes. I think Magen Avram, thinks to maybe other shiur, but someplace the world accepts someplace between 70 and 80 minutes is when the food leaves the stomach. And that's when you can't make a birchas hamazon anymore, because you're not the savata anymore. So the question is, how could the Yidden make a birchas hamazon on man? The Gemara in Yuma says that the man hayanivla beivar miyad la'achar achilase. As soon as they ate it, the body absorbed it. So it was nisakol miyad. So if it's nisakol miyad, how could they make a birchas hamazon on man? And we see that that's where Moshe was nisakin birchas hazan. Those are our two riddles for this week. Before we go to our guest this week, I would like to say a short part. Eik v'haya eikev tishman. V'shamar Hashem aleikecha lecha es habris v'sachesed. This is Moshe, his last testament on the last day of his life. And what's he saying? At the end. And he's really telling us, how do we pave a road through the jungle of life? You know the jungle I'm talking about. How do we clear a path through the underbrush and tangle in our psyche, in our relationship? He says, V'haya eikev tishman. At the heel of all your listening, at the conclusion, V'shamar l'cha Hashem es habris v'sachesed. So Rashi and the Ramban, they pose, Why is at the end, at the conclusion, at the heel, do we use the word Akev? Well, because of all the Shmi Akev, what is he trying to hint? And they say a pshat. But let me suggest another pshat. Why is the end of the road called the heel, different than Rashi and Ramban? We all make commitments. I mean, how many times have you committed to lose weight? Well, some of you anyway. I could say for myself, I'm a master at dieting. There's at least 1,000 diets I've tried. Okay? We've all tried, we've all promised to be a good son, a good daughter, to serve Hashem, to be successful, right? Do you know that January 1st, do you know that 400, your average gym, 60 or 70% of their applications are right after New Year's. How many people show up already in February and March? What happens in the middle? Moods, fear, jealousy, depression, anger. We get very busy. We get in a spiral, right? So what happens? From the spoon to the mouth, there's often many a drop. So what does Moshe tell us the secret is? V'haya Akev. You know what the Akev is? The Akev is the heel. The heel is the part of your body that feels the least. It has a callus on it so that when you walk it doesn't hurt. And it's thick. You can stick a pin into it and it doesn't hurt. It's unfeeling. It's unyielding. It has no emotion to it. Has very little sensation, the heel. And what does Moshe say? Your whole life it's ruled by emotion, feelings, interactions, actions, pressions, depressions, etc. He says, you know what? Just be a soldier. Stop thinking so much. Stop clearing. Stop calculating. Stop making cheshbonos. If he said, if I did it this way, if I did it. You made the commitment. You made it b'slilus hadas. You made it clear-minded. Now go march. Be unfeeling, unyielding, unwavering, uncalculating. Just soldier on. It says by Kaviyachal, in 7 days, 6 days, he created heaven and earth. And what do we say? Baruch Geyser u'mekayim. He made up his mind and he did it. In Maaser Bereishis, what does it say? Vayehi chen. What does it mean? The cheshbonos are over. Just soldier on, unthinking, like a pashut yid. I made up my decision. Now go do it. It says by Avrohom Avinu, Akev asher shama Avrohom b'Kollel. It doesn't say biglal ki. It says Akev at the heel of. What does that mean? Avrohom Avinu, he was promised all of Eretz Yisrael. He had to buy Kav Dalad al Dalad to bury his wife. He had to buy it from Ephron Hachiti. What happened to the promise that you'll get all of Eretz Yisrael? He was promised to become a great nation. Goy Gadol. He had no children. Kahal Amim, he had no children, he had no nation. And that's what, by the way, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe, it seemed to Avram that none of the promises were coming true. But that Avram was mispoiled? Did he change his mind? Did he have kashas and emunah and betachim? It says Akev, he just soldiered on. Just sometimes. And the great Katz Rebbe writes in Sheshek, he writes, he says, on your heart, it should say bilavavecha. You say this every time, twice a day, 3 times a day. What does it say? Bilavavecha. So the Katz Rebbe says, it's not always going to be bilavavecha. There are days you're just not going to want to daven. You're not going to want to learn. You're not going to want to be a good spouse or a good parent or a good child or a good servant of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And you know what he says? He says, not going to be bilavavecha, but keep it alavavecha. If you know you got to do it and you soldier on, that's the most important thing. And what do we know about the Nachash, the evil spirit? What does he do? He's always going to try to bite your heel. What is that a metaphor for? He's going to try to destroy your sense of commitment, your sense of loyalty. The heel means I don't think, sometimes you just do. When you get married, and by the way, marriage is out of style. More than 50% of Americans don't get married anymore. Because marriage is not just about love. The Torah tells us it's about commitment. A wife it's called a covenant. Eshes brisecha. You know what you need a covenant for? You need a treaty for when you're not agreeing. For when you're agreeing, you don't need a treaty. Everybody just acts like that. It's mutual interest. A covenant is for when it's really tough. The mortgage on your house is called a covenant because for a month you say, I wish I did not have this mortgage. I really don't want it. That's why we sign covenants in the mortgage, to bris. A wife is called a bris. What does that mean? There are times or a husband, I really, really don't. I want to say something. And you know what? That's what Akev means. We trudge on, we close our mouth, we do the right things, we stop thinking so much. So what does it say in this week's parsha? V'haya Akev Tishman. If you just soldier on, good things are going to happen. At the end, the Shamar Hashem Alekecha Lecha es habris ves hachesed. You keep your part of the covenant, unthinking even when you don't want, and I will too. And at the end, chesed will come. What does the Gemara say? Kol haloymid Torah balayla chut shel chesed mashach alav kol hayom. In other words, Laila means the times when it's difficult. We keep ours, we trudge on, and you know what? Chut shel chesed will come by yom. The will come back. The love for that spouse, that child, for devotion to the Rabbi Shalom, it will come back. What does Moshe Rabbeinu tell us? The secret is to soldier on. Indifference, a sense of equanimity. And how does the parsha conclude? With Kabbalah el mitzvahs, v'hayim shemaya. Because the secret to mitzvahs is often, just like relationships, a mitzvah is a relationship between us and the Rabbi Shalom. It's not always about how you feel that day. It's just about soldiering on, just getting up in the morning, doing what we got to do. There are times we're going to be inspired, we're going to be thoughtful, we're going to be lumdish, we're going to agree. But the relationship can't just be based on passion, because you know what that means? If we're not passionate one day, that's it. We just pick up and move out, which is how most relationships that don't have a commitment end. So here it's for your Akev Tishman, the Shamar L'cha Hashem, Alekecha Sabris Vesachesed. Soldier on. Let's go to our wonderful guests. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Harav Hagayin Rabbi Yosef Fleishman. He's the Rosh Kollel of the Choshen Mishpat Kollel in Yerushalayim. It's the largest Kollel for Dayanim on Yadin in the world. He's also the Av Bezdin in Nesivos Chaim. Welcome, Rabbi Fleishman.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join you.
So, Rabbi Fleishman, if somebody's, let's say, in real estate or another business, and he sells a building, and he wants to do a 1031 exchange. It's where you put it into an escrow account, and then you transfer that into a second building, and it's basically for IRS purposes. It's not taxable because it's basically considered that you exchanged one asset for another. Does he have to pay Maaser when he sells the building, or he says, wait, I just transferred into another asset for my IRS purposes. It's just an exchange of assets. There was no profit realized here because it went right into something else. Would that be a tax? Would that be from a halacha, from Tzedakah? Would he have to give Maaser from that?
Yes, he would as long as he can access the money and turn it into cash, into accessible monetary vehicle. So then he does. There's a tshuva in the Kovetz Tshuvas from Rabbi Yashin Zatzal. He was asked by someone who was given a trust, which was a bank account in Germany. And so Rabbi Yashin said, if you can withdraw money from it, so then you have to Maaser it right away, and you can't wait until you actually want to take all the money out of the trust. So therefore, in this case also, if when you sell one building, you're going to use the proceeds to buy another building. But since you didn't have to buy another building, you could get money for it. So therefore, you'd have to Maaser the profit that you earned on the first deal, and then they'd take the rest of the money and plow it into another asset.
But if you could not access it, you would not have to give the Maaser. You have to go out of pocket. Now, what would be the rule, let's say, in retirement account, where you can access it but at great penalty? Right? Somebody does for tax reasons. You a 401k. You put aside every month. They take out of your salary 10%, whatever it may be. or 5%. They put it into 401k. So taxes, it's not taxable till after you reach the age of 65. It's a retirement account that many, many Americans use. Would you say, well, you in effect have the income? Well, he says, but it's phantom income. I can't touch it. But he says, wait, you can touch it, but it's just a great penalty. What would you say then?
I would think that he doesn't have to meiser it now, because really that's called inaccessible. It's the reason why they're putting penalties is because they want you to use it as a retirement account, so it's not really accessible.
Okay. So, but on a 1031, tax code does not define tzedakah on a real estate exchange, but in a trust or a 401 trust, if it's accessible, yes, and in a 401k, only if you can access it without penalty. What would be the halacha if a person had a gain in one deal and a loss in another? He's a trader. He trades on Amazon. He bought one shipment, made $25,000. It's all the simcha. The next month later, he loses $25,000. What's the halacha? Do you say it's two different transactions? Pay Maaser on the first $25,000, on the second one we feel very bad for you, or do you have a right to balance them out?
So the Avrohom, like the Rabbi Yehuda and the Chaim brings down also, say that a person doesn't have to make a computation Maaser like every day. Person can set aside a certain time once or twice a year. I think Rabbi Yehuda suggested doing it every half a year, and that a person should, and some people, and he said a person should do it. Says shana b'shana at least once a year. So a person should take accounting of what he's made, and he can write off losses against his gains. However, if a person did it sooner, so then he can't. In other words, if a person right away Maaser his profit, so then he can't do it lemafreya, to say that I had profit and I have the next loss and take it off against the profit. Once you did it, so then you've closed the books sort of on your deals. So if it's within the period of time between, let's say a person does it, some people like to do it when they pay taxes April 15th. So let's say a person does his cheshbonos April 15th, he pays all his Maaser out, so then all the deals that he made between last April 15th and this April 15th, he can figure one against the other, and then if he had profit, so then he has to give Maaser, and if he didn't, he didn't.
Now, in tax, there's a concept of a loss carry forward. So if somebody, let's say, in the year, last year he made a lot of money, gave Maaser, this year he lost a lot of money. And so now the following year, next year, if he makes a lot of money, you say, look, last year was a down year for my business. We lost $1 million. This year I made $1 million. So really, if you look at the 2 years from a tax point of view, you could carry forward last year's loss into this year and say it's neutral. You seem to be saying that the Rabbi Yehuda says we look at each year as an individual thing, and there are no loss carry forwards. Is that correct?
That's correct, but it's not necessarily a year. And there's whatever person decides to make his calculations, so then he's closed the books, and there's no such thing as carrying forward. Correct.
Now, Rabbi Fleishman, since Maaser Kesofim is a minig or a drabanan at best, like, what is it based on? It just seems to be like, is there a makor from Chazal for this concept, or is it just sort of, everybody has their own opinion?
Yeah, Tosas brings down in Tanis. The Medrash says, you learn out from the pasuk. It says, "Aser to aser is called tuas asada hayotz asada shana shana." Right. So therefore, and it says in the Sifri that is marbe. It's called tuas asada. Not only tuas asada, but also if a person earns money from ribis, it mentions it does el pragmatia, business dealings. So also a person is supposed to give Maaser. So some people say that it's a limit from the pasuk. There are people that even say that it's a deraisa, but most people don't. Most people say that it's just an asmachta, but it's learned out from there. And the Rambam brings it down as the Rambam says that there's the mitzvah tzedakah that a person, the takana person shouldn't give more than 20%, more than a chomesh of his income, and a mida beininus is to give Maaser, and less than Maaser is considered to be not a mida beininus. So there has the makor is basically the Sifri, and the Bam says there's a din of tzedakah in Hilchos Tzedakah, and the consensus opinion is most people hold that it's a minig. But it's a minhag,
No,
which is...
but Rabbi Fleishman, that wasn't my question. I'm saying it's about whether you can write off 1 year against the other year. What would be a makar for that?
I guess it's just the nota behuda. I mean, really, the whole thing that you can write off one deal against the other is not even pashut. It's a machlokas. There are people that say not. The Pischut brings the Sharafayim that says that you can't. That a person knows his profits from one thing, he has to do each deal separately.
But
the Chiddush is those.
What's the source of the Sharafayim? Is it just a svara? Does he have a raya? Like, it just seems very arbitrary. We have a minig, and now we're saying, well, you can write off one deal against the other, 1 year against the other. What is the makar for that? Like, is it? I know there's a night of the tinyana and the Sharafayim, but is it just each one has an opinion? Like, what is the makar for this halacha of writing one off against the other a year per year?
I would imagine that's basically a svara, because the people that say that you can't even write off one deal against the other, they would hold that you can't do it ever. And the other people are saying that you can figure things out once a year, and that's it. I mean, just because the IRS decided to have a loss carryover provision, so that doesn't change the halacha. I mean, the IRS doesn't make a halacha. And basically,
but it is common sense. I mean, during the course of a day, if a guy trades, 1 hour he's up, 1 hour he's down. So if we said every hour you're up, pay Maisa. Next hour you're down, sorry. It
right.
Doesn't,
so that's
logical.
That's agreed upon, but so therefore the nota behuda is basically a svara, and as you mentioned before, once these svaras are in place and people do them, so then they have the power of the minig, and since the consensus opinion is that Ma'aseh Kesofim is minhag, so therefore it would probably those become the rules.
Okay, could somebody use Ma'aseh money to buy an aliyah in shul? They're raffling off they're auctioning off, a mafti yaina, and one guy bids 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. This guy wants mafti yaina. It's such an incredible school, and maybe he looks good in front of his friends. He says $3,500. Comes home, his wife says, Yassel, Beryl, Nachman, you're mishuggah. You just spent 30. He says, don't worry, it's coming off of Maisa money. What's the halacha?
So the Taz brings down, the basic rule is that a person can have Tovas Hadar, just like when a person gives his Truma out and his Maaser out, so he can have Tovas Hadar, can give it to his friend who is a Kohen, a friend who's a Levi. So therefore, he could do it as well. He can have certain side benefits from it, like in this case, that it's a skula or whatever, covered maybe. So he could do it, but it's very. The Taz brings down some Fleishman test. Taz says that a person has to do it, have intention right away to do it from his Maaser body. If it's only after his wife started yelling at him that he decides to use his Maaser money, he can't do it because he already owes the money to the shul. However, if at the time that he was bidding for it, he thought that I'm going to use my Maaser money for it, so then the Taz and most people say that he could use the entire amount. There are people there are poskim who say that you can only use it to outbid the other person. If the other person was bidding $2,000 and then you come in with your offer of $3,500, so that their taina is that you can only use $1,500 as your Maaser because the net profit to the shul, the shul would have given it to someone else for $2,000, and the only reason why you're getting it is because you outbid him. So the profit that the shul got from your higher bid is only $1,500. So there are those people who say that you can only take $1,500 for Maaser. However, a lot of people hold like the Taz, that you could take the entire amount off of Maaser, but the person has to be careful and think of it when he's doing it, that he's intending to use Maaser for it, and not become chayev to give the shul money and then say I'm going to give it for Maaser.
But Rabbi Fleishman, I've honestly never understood the Taz. You're getting a real value. If it wasn't a real value, people wouldn't be bidding on it. I mean, we see people, bid on all types of honorariums to become a board member. You want to become a board member of the Brookings. What is it? It's covet, and people pay $50,000, $100,000 a year. So covet is something that people pay for. This is not only covet, but it's also it's a spiritual thing. It's a davar ruchni. I got my mafti yain. I would be willing to pay mafti yain even if it didn't go to a shul. I never understood is something that is you can't touch is not considered a value. I mean, You know, you could be Mekadesh an Isha with Hana. If somebody
That's
would tell an Isha, I'm going to be Mekadesh you with buying you Mafta Yaina, assuming an Isha could be Oilul Mafta Yaina, or buying your father Mafta Yaina, right? You would say, Bahiyana, Vadaya Mekudeshes. So why it's certainly a Shava Kesef. Why, when you're getting a value in return, could you use it's well accepted in the Paiskim, you can't use Maisa money to pay tuition, to pay your taxes of the area of the Sugi Shemesh. But so why this, which is a real Hana and has real value, and people pay for it, and I believe people would pay for it even if it didn't go for the shul. Somebody could buy it very cheap and then flip it to his friends for more money. What's the svar of the Taz? Since you can't touch it, it's a Taivas Hana. When we see in Kedusha, not like that.
Well, 1 second, but two things. First of all, you see in Kedushin also, the Gemara, there's a machlokas in the Gemara of Tovas Hana's Mammon or not, right? And those people that hold Tovas Hana's Mammon say also that you can be Mekadesh Lisha. In other words, a person could give his Ma'aser Rishon to a lady and say, I'm going to give you this Ma'aser Rishon, and with that I'll be Mekadesh Isha, so to speak, right? So you see that a person can use his Trumas and his Ma'asers out and get this benefit. However, I do agree with you in a certain sense. It's probably true that if for example, Moshe Feinstein talks about buying a lottery ticket, not a lottery ticket, but buying a ticket from a raffle ticket. A raffle. So he says and he differentiates. He says that in the schools, in the schools, every institution, they have raffles. So Moshe says that it depends. That if they have a fixed amount of raffles, they say that we're going to sell 1,000 raffles, and it's something that people would buy. So then, just like people buy lottery tickets, even though if you think about it, doesn't from a financial investment point of view, it doesn't make sense to do it. But people do buy lottery tickets, even though their chances of winning, let's say 20%, 10%. So Moshe says the same thing is true, that if you buy a raffle from a Torah institution, a stock institution, so Moshe says that then you can't use Maisa money for it because it's something that people buy. So therefore, coming back to your question, I would think that it has...
I believe the Ramesh you're referring to is in Chaim Chelik Dalot Simenayin Vav, right?
Perfect. Right,
yeah.
It's a famous shuv because the first part of the shuv he talks about the cholent, and it's got latched onto the back. So coming back to your question, I would think that you may be correct that the Taz wasn't talking about situations like you're saying where people would really give the money, and that he was talking about something, but Torah is sort of a side kind of benefit that a person has. It's true that it may be Mammon and you may be able to be Mekadesh Isha, but it's not the prime purpose of doing it. However, if a person's prime purpose in buying Maftiyona is to get covered, and he would pay whatever he's giving the shul $3,500, and he would give, let's say, he would pay $1,000 or $2,000 for the covered, and that's some other covered like Brookings Institute.
But
so then I would agree with you.
Or for the and if it was for the I apologize. You're saying if it's for the covered, you agree. What about if it's just for the ruchnius? Like if I would pay dollar X, I'd pay $1,000 to have 5 minutes of a guy in Reb Chaim Kanievsky's time. Right. Isn't that a real value?
It is. I don't think you could if you paid $1,000.
Could I use that could I use Maisa money for that?
Probably not.
So why would Mafta Yaina be any different?
No, so I would agree with you that if a person would pay, even if the money wouldn't be going to the shul, a person would really want to buy maftiyona for covered or for the bigger schooler, that people could say that there's a schooler to do well in business the next year. So then I would agree with you that you probably could not. I don't think the Taz is talking about it. The Taz is talking about a situation where the person was buying an Aliyos for his friend. So okay, so it's something that you would do. You'd pay a little bit of money for it, maybe, but it's not the prime purpose of it.
Okay. Okay. So Rabbi Fleishman, do you have to give Maaser on a present? You're a Choshen in Kala, and your parents just did a really nice wedding, or maybe a takana wedding, and now you got $10,000 or $5,000 in gifts. You have to give Maaser from it.
So most posts can say that not. The Chazon Ish said that not, the people don't. And basically the reason why is because of minig. The minig is not to do it, so therefore that's the way it is. However, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said that people do have to give. Where it comes into play and is sort of a big headache in Israel is that parents buy apartments for their kids, and then the kid has an apartment that's cost, 2 million shekels, and he has no way to pay 200,000 shekels. So Shlomo Zalman says that you don't have to pay it all out right now, but you should know that you owe Maaser 200,000 shekels and pay it off over time. That was his opinion. But most poskim don't hold that way. Most poskim say that by goods, and even if, let's say in 5 years' time from now, you'll sell the good and you'll cash in on it, but still a lot of people like Reb Nissen Karelitz says that you don't have to pay Maaser even when you do sell it.
So let me go down a rabbit hole for a minute. In the case of, let's say, a guy gets a dira, right?
Right.
Now, he doesn't have, if it's in the case of Eretz Yisrael, in 90% of the cases, these are young Galayit who do not have the reish zuz that they need to be nisparnus for the year. They do not have 1 year's living expenses. Why would he at all be mechuyev in Maaser?
It's true.
I mean, if according to the Shulchan Aruch and Reish V'Mtes, he's patim and Tzedakah, and he only has to give like $3 a year or something, why would it even become an issue?
It's correct. And if you're in that category, however, a lot of Avrohom, Baruch Hashem, their wives work and they have regular. They do have a panosa, and they can live from it. It's correct what you're saying. If a person doesn't have money to live, or and as you say, there's reish zuz really means that a person has for a year's supply, and it also has to be that looking forward that he has some reasonable source of income that's a steady job. But so therefore, if a person's wife has a good job and she can make ends meet and support the family, so then it's true.
So the reish zuz does not mean you have to have it in the bank. It means that you have a job which will earn you the reish zuz over the course of the year.
Right, the source of reish zuz really is the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that it describes which people can take pay, like a shikhan payah. So it says a person has reish zuz, so then if he has more than that, so then he can't take like a shikhan payah. And if he doesn't have reish zuz, so then he can. But and reish zuz in the time of Chazal was the amount the person needed to live for a year. So therefore they sort of transposed this over to the case of Maaser Kesofim and said that a person that doesn't have is not earning reish zuz in a year, and that's earning what it costs to support his family. The reish zuz by them also meant for each member of the family. So therefore, a person needs to have some source of income that's going to allow him to support his family for the year. And if he doesn't, so then it's not only that he doesn't have to give Maaser, he can collect. In other words, you can give him your Maaser money.
Wow. So can you use Maaser money to pay shul dues, tuition, the things that, basically as a frum Jew, your societal requirements? Or family requirements.
It says in the Gemara that when it talks about Maaser, it says kol davar shebechova einu ba'olam elachulin, that anything which a person has to do, he can't use something which is kodesh to do. The same thing for Maaser. They use that rule for Maaser as well. So anything that you're required to do, so then they can't use your Maaser money for it. For example, like Rosh Feinstein, well, first of all, by tuition for boys, so for sure, a person has a mitzvah to teach his children Torah, so he has to send them to Yeshiva and take some time until they're able. It says you have to teach him Torah so he's able to understand how to learn, understand Svaras, and be able to learn shas on his own. Until you get to that stage, so the father is responsible to take it's one of his mitzvahs. So you can't sort of kill two birds with one stone. You can't take your Maaser money to also be mekayim the mitzvah of limud Torah, of teaching your child Torah, and also Maaser. So you can't do that. So the general rule is that anything that you are required to do, so then you can't. And Moshe has a big chiddush. He says even that paying for a girl, even though you don't have a mitzvah to teach girls Torah, but he says that since in most places, like in America and in Israel, so there's a law of compulsory education. You have to send your child to some kind of educational institution, and if you're not going to send them to yeshiva, you're going to have to send them to public school. And he says if you can send them to public school, so then they're not going to have any Murin HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and probably they'll go off the derech. And so therefore you're required to send your daughter to Beis Yaakov. So he says that you can't take off the expense, even of sending your daughter to Beis Yaakov. You can't do that either. And the same thing is true about shul dues. Person needs a shul. You have to certainly every community. It says in Choshen Mishpat that every community has to support you need communal institutions like a shul and a mikveh and a school. So all those things are requirements for a person to pay. So then a person wouldn't be able to pay for his shul either. The only situation when a person could use Maaser money to pay shul's dues is, let's say he has one shul where he davens in, and another shul which he goes once in a while, and is giving them membership dues because he feels he'd like to help the shul out. So that situation, so then he could use some of his Maaser money to pay shul dues. And probably even then he can't use the whole thing, but a significant part, because if he figures that, look, I really, the use that I have of the shul is very little, and I would pay X amount of money, but now I'm paying $2,000 a year, so he'll have to pay $2,000 minus X he could take from Maaser.
Okay. What would you say, Rabbi Fleishman, if somebody lent money to a poor person, to Mekayim Kesef Talvesami, and Kesef Talvesami, and then the person defaults on the loan and doesn't pay you back, and you did it al the mitzvah of Kesef Talva, could you write it off of Maaser?
Well, if you, it depends really. Now, what a person could do in the beginning is, if you want to take care of the situation, you have foresight. So a person can when a person gives Maaser, the Chaim says that a person is allowed to set up a loan fund and use that, it is part of his Maaser money to fund a loan fund. So, for example, in the Chaim says he would think that it's a good idea that a person should use a third of his Maaser money to establish a loan fund, and 2/3 to give out. And Vosner says that in Israel now he thinks a half and a half, but whatever, a certain percentage. So then, if your money came from that stock of money, which had already been Maaser money, and you lend it to the poor person, and he lost it. So he lost it. So then, as you won't have the money to lend to another person, but Maaser sort of funded that poor person's loan, and the loss will be Maaser's loss. However, if you didn't do it that way, and you lend your own personal money to the person, so then you're not in such good shape, because basically you lost your money, and now you're trying to sort of backtrack and take and throw it onto Maaser. So you're in much worse shape. What you could do, if you take into consideration the fact that there's no real thing halachically as going bankrupt. As a person can't pay his debts, so and he goes to court and gets protection from under the bankruptcy law, he really didn't pater himself from paying his debts. So what you could do, and if you're in the good terms with the poor person, you could give him a present, and tell him that, listen, you can't obligate him to do it, but you can discuss it with him. Tell him, I'll give you this present so that you can repay your loan, and so that if he is cooperative with you, you could give him the present. And then if he decides to use the money to repay the loan, so then you're in good shape, because then you've used your Maaser money and you got your money back.
Very clever. Let me ask you a letter I got from a listener, okay? He says he donated to a publishing house, a for-profit publishing house, $25,000 to have his grandfather's name on one of their Gemaras that they publish. And it's a for-profit company. They don't disclose what they make, but it's very well known. and he says, if you give money to a for-profit institution because you want to have your name on a sefer, can you take that honorarium off of Maaser?
I don't think so. I mean, what's the cause? I mean, all you're doing really is helping the publishing company out.
Well, but you are causing a sefer to be, it's a better Gemara, it's Kiddushin, it's with Pirushim, it's in English, and this and that. So you are causing, getting Gemaras printed seems to be a good thing. The fact that the counter argument is people pay $35 for the Gemara and the publishing house makes a profit. Would that be considered Maaser or not?
But in the end of the day, I mean, certainly if the publishing company is earning the money from selling the Sfarim, so then basically, why should they're sort of double dipping? They're charging the customers and they're covering their expenses by selling the Gemaras, and then they're taking money from you to, I don't know, fund themselves, make themselves richer. I don't know. In that situation, for sure, that if it's true that they wouldn't be able to publish the sefer without your thing, so then it could be that I would think that if the sefer would not be published, if not for your donation, so then probably the part of the money that's needed in order to cover their costs would be a Maaser expense, because a person in principle, that if they wouldn't be selling the sefer, let's say you want to publish a sefer, they're going to give out the sefer for free. Like sometimes they give out Sfarim for free. They'll give out the Chaim's Shemesh for free to people who want to learn Shemesh. So in that situation, then for sure you could use the Maaser money, because you're helping people learn Chaim, and without it, it wouldn't be, and no one's making a profit from it. But here, if they make a profit, so if they covered all their costs and they're making profits.
It's a for-profit corporation. If it was losing money, it would be a not-for-profit corporation. So it's clearly, it is technically, according to IRS, a for-profit. It's not a 501c3. In other words, what this organization does is they have one 501c3 that they do all the writing in, but all the publishing is done in a for-profit separate entity. So if you, I would think you should put them both together.
I would think that if the sale firm covers their costs, then they can't tell you that you can give Maaser for it.
You can't do it for Maaser. Let me ask you a question. It's very common, and this is something in the Jewish world you have that you don't have in, let's say, the American world at large. But let's say if you go to any public college or private college, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, whatever, nobody owns them. I'm on the board of Turo. Nobody owns Turo. When Rabbi Landa, Dr. Landa died, there was always a board in place, and we made a great honorarium for him, etc. But the Maaser goes further. It's owned by the tzibur, right?
There's such a thing in Israel. I don't think there's any such thing.
No, in America, most schools are that way. Most certainly Geisha schools, and Turo was done that way. It was owned by it was done by a public board. In fact, as a board member, you have to sign extensive things that you have no business with the school. You don't make any money from the school. You're totally independent board. And when he died, he did it very honorably. Now, many Maastis in America, in the Orthodox world, unfortunately, they're sort of, it's to be a 501c3, you're supposed to be public, but it's really not the case. The brother-in-law, the mother-in-law, the sister-in-law, the father-in-law on the board, and for all practical purposes, it's a private family-owned enterprise. Now, somebody goes ahead and he donates $50,000 for a building, which at the end of the day, it's really owned by the so-and-so family with all their family members in the board. Can you take that money off of Maaser, or do you say, look, this is not a charity in the respect that they could sell the building if they want, and this has happened. It's happened to me personally where I donated, and then the guy at some point closed the yeshiva and then sold the building. And looking back, was I able to take that money from Maaser, or do you say, look, yeshiva learned there for 10 years or 12 years, or do you say, well, it's at the end of the day, it's a private. There are private colleges too in the United States, not public colleges. It's a private college, and it's not tzedakah. What would be the Rav's opinion?
I would think that if they portray themselves as a tzedakah organization, so then the person doesn't have a right to go sell it and take the money for himself. Because by tzedakah, so the tzedakah sort of continues. If a person wants to give tzedakah money, so then it has to be used as tzedakah. So I think the problem with your yeshiva is that they sold it and put it in their pocket. That no one's intention really is to give the money as a donation to Mr. X, who happens to run a yeshiva. So therefore, such a situation really shouldn't exist. In the time of Chazal, things didn't belong to anyone, and if let's say a person donated money to a certain cause, and then that cause folds up. Let's say a person that has a kollel, for example, and then the kollel would fold. So then the assets are supposed to be given to another kollel, and not to be given to the Rosh kollel. They're not his.
So, but here's my question, Rabbi Fleishman. Clearly, the intent is of the person is it should go to tzedakah and not to so-and-so family, right?
I would think that what you should do is make a condition with him that when you donate the money to him, what a person really should do is make a condition with the institution that they can use the building, for example. They can use it as long as it's a yeshiva, and if the yeshiva should fold, then they have to give the money to another Torah institution or something like that, or give it back to you.
Well, Rabbi Fleishman, as always, it's a great honor to have you on with us.
Thank you very much, and enjoy it very much.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from London, Rabbi Eli Katz, who's a Talmud of Gateshead and Mir. He's an author of Pasayach Tiftach Es Yadcha on Tzedakah, Easy Giving. It's been translated into English, Easy Giving, on Tzedakah and Ma'aseh Kesofim. He's also a Talmud Chacham who's written Sfarim on Birchas Kehanim and on Tumas Oilis Legabe Kehanim. He's just writing a sefer now on Torah and science. He's also a Talmud of Hagayin Ramoshe Shapiro Zecher Tzadik Levracha. And he also runs a technology company, so he's really Eichel Mishnei Shel Chanes. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Katz.
Yes, and an honor to be here as well. And just to be posting b'chvoid Achsanya, I had a thought the last few days when we were all not so many days ago sitting on the floor, and one of the kinnas was Charlie Sufa, clearly a very troubling kinna, all about the times when written by the Maram Rothenberg, when all the Gemaras and Mishnayos of those days were destroyed, and looking back at the development of the printing press, can you imagine how our Jewish life would be without the printing press? Imagine what it would mean to be a full person today without all the swarm that we have. And in that context, I think the effort that you and David are doing through being Marbitz Torah via all new means of technologies, entering us into the next generation, whether via apps or on the web, all of this is a way to be Marbitz Torah and be Molah Ha'oretz De'ah.
Thank you very much. And clearly, the web is certainly a very dangerous tool, but it could also be used for good as well.
Yeah. So
Rabbi Katz, as somebody who's just published a sefer on Ma'aseh Kesofim, give us a tutorial. Can a parent use Maaser to pay for tuition?
Right. Okay. So first of all, just one extra introduction. So as you can tell, I'm more of a balabos. I'm not a Rav and a Posek. In Boshem, you have two other guests here on the show who are Moya Halacha, who are Poskim. So I'm giving a balabos view. Boshem haven't been ma'ayin to the Inyonim, and certainly I'm not being Moya Halacha. So I think to address that question, which is obviously a very sensitive question asked worldwide, and everybody's in a very difficult position on this, so let's try to understand a bit of the background in order of Tzedakah of Ma'aseh Kesofim, which I think will help lay out the framework for answering that question about school fees and tuition. So I think the starting point to understand is there's many different aspects of what we kind of loosely call Tzedakah, and in that category is quite a few different subcategories, which from a halakhic perspective have quite a different approach. So if we just take three, which are kind of the principal three. Number one is something that most people do not necessarily commonly associate with tzedakah, but it's very much part of chiyuvim with one's money to institutions. So the halachas in Choshen Mishpat, so not in Yoda, in Choshen Mishpat, the starting point is Siman Kuf Samach Gimel about koifim b'nei ha'ir zeh zeh, and that is a obligation, according to many shittas, even deraisa. And certainly this obligation, this chiyuv, comes before Hilchos Tzedakah and comes before Hilchos Maaser Kesofim. So I'm just highlighting that the halakha is about supporting essential local communal infrastructure. The din of Kollel here says Paskin and the Ramah very clearly, and Kamat Lekula Alma Moshe, and many others, Eliezer, Sheva Levi, all Paskin very clearly. This comes before mitzvah tzedakah. So that's kind of the first structure to deal with. The second is...
And with the logic being, Rabbi Katz, with the logic being is if you're paying for your local roads and utilities, that is not tzedakah, but that is your obligation. You use the roads, you use the utilities, you have to pay for them. So supporting the meistis that are actually integral for the survival of the community that you use, you're not doing anybody favors. This is not about gemilas chesadim. It's because you're part of a community. You use those services. You have to pay. You're obligated to pay your portion for those services. Would that be the understanding?
That's absolutely correct. The subtlety is that where it is in Mishpat is in Hilchos Shutfin. You are an implicit, you didn't sign necessarily a partnership agreement with all your community members. If you did, that would be wonderful. But even if you didn't, there's an implicit Hilchos Shutfin, there's an implicit partnership that you have by being part of the kehillah, which ensures that therefore that what is essential for the kehillah, the three classic cases being schools, mikvahs, and welfare, all of those things are obligations. And if done correctly, to really push your point with David, you can't even use your Maaser Kesofim for that chelek, if implemented correctly. And that's a separate discussion. But yes, the broad principle is that is a not midin tzedakah, not midin chesed, just a straightforward shutvin dika chiyuv. Yes.
Okay, so continue. Now let's go to tuition. Right. Let's talk about tuition.
So now we have a mitzvah tzedakah, and mitzvah tzedakah, let's be very clear, from a deraisa perspective, kamat lekula alma, certainly Gepaskin in the Ramah, and kamat all achronim nowadays from our perspective, the mitzvah tzedakah is for aniyim. And there might be some slight variations in that, but the mitzvah deraisa tzedakah is a mitzvah deraisa that applies to aniyim. Then you come on to the third category, which is now not necessarily part of mitzvah tzedakah, but it's the inyan of Maaser Kesofim. And Maaser Kesofim, yes, according to some shitters, the Gra very clearly, shitters and Tosfos, it is deraisa. According to some, it's Rabban, but according to the majority, it's a minig, clearly a minig atikin, and it's a minig that we should certainly not ignore, as it has lots of its own obligations to it. But those are the three categories. So when it comes to the question of analyzing the status vis-a-vis tuition and school fees, let's look at it from the last category in relation to Maaser Kesofim. So by Maaser Kesofim, very clearly, the starting point is that one can't be Pirei Achoivoi min Maaser. So if there are school fees that are being charged for on a fairly straightforward basis, the school is invoicing for those fees, then that is an obligation that is on you, like any other personal obligation. And just like we can't be Pirei Achoivoi min a Maaser, can't be Pirei Achoivoi min a tzedakah. And therefore, in these cases, one can't use, it would seem to be that one can't use your Maaser Kesofim money to be able to pay something that is an obligation that comes upon you. There are, of course, a few exceptions to this. So Ramosha, that's before the exceptions. Ramosha extends this as follows. When is it an obligation? So either it is an obligation mitzad midin haTorah, that's an obligation at some point to be sending your children to school, in which case then there's an obligation min haTorah, or al pi halacha. There's also, Moshe extends it to say not only if it's al pi halacha that you have an obligation to send your children to school, therefore it's a choiv and it can't be prayer, but likewise if there's a state obligation. So if there's an obligation from a kind of dinner de malchus dinner in inverted commas, then that will likewise provide an obligation on you. You need to send your children to school, and you can't take your children out of school. Therefore, in those situations when you have a chiyuv to send your children to school, then it would be in those cases it would seem to be parei choiv min a maaser. Moshe is very clear on this, not only for boys but also for girls, because of that point is not only mitzad halacha but also mitzad din malchus in that sense. The Chaim likewise is extremely clear in Avos Chesed that one cannot use Maaser Kesofim money, the Shevet Levi, Shulchan Aruch Harav. The few exceptions that one can imagine are in the following scenarios. Number one, you have a choice of which school to send your children. Let's say you have the opportunity. And there's a school which will give a higher madrega of whatever you're choosing, a higher madrega of Torah learning in school more expensive. So there are some who say that since now this is your chiyuv is just to be able to send to a proper Torah school, but you've made a decision to send it to the better school, but that comes with a more expensive cost. So some say that you could use your Kesofim money for that extra amount. There's another angle, which is that if the school, and this, obviously I live in the UK, so I'm not so comfortable about what the situation is in the States, but in the UK you have some schools here which are called state schools, different from the state school in the States, where the fees are actually voluntary. So the school is not able to send out an invoice and demand from you, but they're sending out a recommendation, voluntary. If so, then this is not necessarily the case of being Poreya Choivo Menamaisa, because it's a voluntary donation that the school is asking for you. So again, there are some who say, in those situations, that one could use your Kesofim money to be able to pay, in that case, since it's a voluntary contribution rather than a choiv contribution.
So, to sum it up, an obligation that you have, let's say, of tuition, either because the state requires it or because halacha requires it, you can't fulfill an obligation, a choiv on you, through tzedakah, because it's not an act of chesed if you're fulfilling an obligation. Whereas, is it fair to say, Rabbi Fleishman, Rabbi Katz, that if somebody invites guests to their home, it's an act of gemilas chasadim. But if somebody has a bed and breakfast and people are paying for it, it's not an act of chesed anymore. It's a business. Is that fair to say? I mean, it's commerce. So if you have an obligation, a debt, you can't repay your debt, notwithstanding I understand our president frequently did that from his charity foundation. You can't repay a debt from tzedakah. You can do something voluntary from tzedakah. So if your school asks, we're building a new building, and we ask parents, but we don't obligate them to make a donation to the new building fund, the building fund would be able to be taken off of MISA, but the tuition would not be able to be taken off of MISA. Have I summarized what you said correctly or not?
Yes, and in fact, just to highlight, in the situations that you just gave, for example, there, where it is voluntary, then in that case, looking from the other side in terms of there are various different types of distribution that one can do with one's Kesofim, and that's probably a subject which we'll come onto a bit later. But in essence, if something is going towards a Torah institution, then that clearly is a high madrega in your Kesofim distribution. So in fact, being able to give donations to schools in general when it is on the voluntary basis certainly ticks a number of important boxes, albeit it's not necessarily the aniyim chelek.
Okay, now let me ask you, so now you have a son or a daughter, they go to school, and you pay tuition not from Kesofim, and you want to hire a night Rebbe for your son. Now, you don't have to do that. You just want to do an enrichment for his, or for your daughter for that matter. A tutor, a night Rebbe, and would you be able to pay for that from MISA?
So yes, you would have thought so, because as you just described, it's entirely on a voluntary basis, so kind of mahekatesa not. I have seen quoted in the name of Rabbi Yosef that this is only when the private tuition is to bring the child, boy or girl, above the level of the class. So if it's purely to reach that madrega, then I can't say exactly perhaps why there should be this chiluk, but I have seen a nafkamin in this. If it's to raise above the level, then that is something which is kind of over and above. Then for that Kesofim it should be used if it's purely to raise.
Rabbi Katz, I would venture to say that the logic is that if your son does not do well at school, they will require you to bring him up to the level to be able to pass him to the next year. So that goes into, when you send them to school, you have to send them with clothing, with a lunchbox. It all goes into the school's obligation. Passing the tests and meeting the requirements that the school sets is part of it. So he's not meeting the requirements, so just get on board and, get with the act. So that is not a voluntary thing. That is involuntary. I understand Rabbi Yasha very well.
That could well be the svar. Obviously, it's an interesting contract, in inverted commas, that exists between school and parents. But yes, that could well be the svar, yes.
So, Rabbi Katz, who is an ani? You have a younger man who is, he's upholding the world with his Torah, and he's living on and I was a younger man for a number of years, and you're getting $80 from your Kollel a week, and your parents are sending you another $100 or $200, whatever it may be, and your wife is, just busting her chops to try to hold down a job, raising the kids. It's the stress of a younger man. And now they get up and they say, we'd like you to give, pidyon shvuyim to some cause. And the guy says, I can't make ends meet. I mean, who is an ani?
Okay, so good question. So I think I'll break that down into two parts. Number one, as you said, who is an ani? Question number one. And question number two, if someone is an ani,
is he mechuyev in tzedakah? Is
he mechuyev or not? So let's kind of work through both of those aspects. So who is an ani? So as we know, from a Shulchan Aruch perspective, the shir that the Chazal came up with was Reish Zuz, which is basically somebody, that is the amount that will be sufficient for an Odom Beinani. Certainly would depend upon the personal circumstances, for what is his minimum requirements for the year. So in generic purposes, an ani would be someone who does not have an annual income sufficient to cover their essential household expenses of the family for that year, allowing for a basic standard of living with no luxuries as defined by the society in which he lives. So from that perspective, you've kind of captured the essence of who is an ani. Now, obviously, there are certain exceptions in relation to that. So, for instance, if there are exceptional expense items coming up, there's a chasna coming up, somebody is unwell, all of that will be nechshav in the definition of what is my expenditure for the coming year. Likewise, someone who's not necessarily earning a fixed or kavua dika amount. So, for instance, if a kollel, which some kollim do have, that on their agreement with which they're going to pay you the stipend, and if the clause in there states that we will pay this to you on the basis that we are able to raise the sufficient funds, but if we can't raise it, you're not going to be paid, don't have any timers on us. So already there, the Chamunah would highlight that that's not necessarily would therefore be classed as kind of a regular income. Therefore, in that situation, you may be able to even discount what that stipend is from that perspective. So that would be kind of the standard definition of what is an ani.
Which Rabbi Katz would seemingly fit all Jungelite and most Klei Kodesh, I imagine, and I would imagine a reasonable number of people do not have the means to live through a year. So I think it's fair to say that it would cover a large portion of society. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
So that leads to my next question, obviously, which the Mechaber and Reish Mem Zayin and Reish Mem Ches discuss. Is an ani, you are somebody who do not have the means to live through the year. Now you go to shul and you're besieged by people, your school is besieging you, etc., and you have this guilty feeling, why am I giving more tzedakah? Like, am I meeting my end? So the question I ask you, does somebody who qualifies as an ani, which you've qualified as somebody who does not have enough money to live basic living standards for a year as defined by the society that he lives, which in the United States would include medical insurance, basic tuition, auto insurance, rent, etc. Now they're banging on your doors. What is the chiyuv tzedakah of somebody who is halachically defined as an ani?
Right, excellent question. So, remember we discussed before that there's two different inyonim that we're discussing. One is the mitzvah of tzedakah, and the second is the hanhoga, let's call it, of Maaser Kesofim. So certainly from a Hilchos Tzedakah perspective, that means the mitzvah deraisa of tzedakah, somebody who is an ani is not mechuyev to give tzedakah except for the minimum share. So in Hilchos Tzedakah, there are broadly 4 shiurim: a shlish shekel, Maaser, i.e. 10% of income, chomish, 20% of income, and day machzorei. Those are the 4 shiurim. According to the Chaim, for example, all 4 of those shiurim are deraisa dika shiurim in the mitzvah of tzedakah. And it would seem to be, from the consensus of most poskim, that the very minimum, the obligation, even at an ani level, will be shlish shekel. To put that into absolute terms, That's if we take Choshen in terms of the definitions of the weight of the silver, 6.8 grams, which is as of today $3.20. So that's a $3.20 amount per year would fulfill your mitzvah d'oraisa at the minimum level, obviously, mitzvah d'oraisa level of tzedakah.
So when the Shulchan Aruch says that even an ani, right, or in Reish Mem Ches, it says the Mechaber says that even an ani has to give tzedakah. He means with $3.20 a year, a young gaman in Kollel or anybody who's struggling who fits this definition is mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah midaraisa, and anything after that would already fall into the area of Maaser, and Maaser an ani is not mechayiv to give. Am I correct?
I haven't said that.
Okay, go ahead.
So your summing just now on Hilchos Tzedakah d'oraisa is correct. So when we now move to Maaser, so that gets a bit more interesting, because from a Maaser Kesofim perspective, there are those shitters who do hold that although an oni is potter midin the mitzvah d'oraisa of tzedakah, but nevertheless from a Maaser Kesofim perspective, an oni may in fact be mechuyev, provided that at least his absolute minimum sustenance level, it's kind of the Lashon of Derech Emunah, is as long as that kind of the minimum sustenance level is there, then there could be at that point an obligation on Maaser Kesofim. Now, let's put this into perspective. Number one is that if ultimately by giving out any additional money beyond the $3.20 means that therefore that person himself has got to go out and raise money for his own minimum standards, that's clearly not a sensible thing to do, and that's clearly not where it would apply. But there are many who do learn that the Choshen, for example, says that therefore, because basically you are mechuyev, but you're basically an oinus that you can't, so you should calculate what the Maaser would be, calculate what your 10% of your net income is, make a note of it, put it to the side, and eventually one day, when you're in a position that you can repay what that Maaser Kesofim is, then you should do so. So, although, as I said, there are some who say that you are mechuyev to, if at all feasible, and not that will force you to collect, and others are, the Choshen as an example, says you should make a note and pay it later. Others say, because, again, the din of Maaser Kesofim comes, according to many Rishonim, is a din in Maaser, so there's a milah in being mafresh the Maaser, mafresh the 10%, and then keep it for yourself. Midin, I am an oni, I can keep the Maaser. But go through a process of actually calculating, sitting down, doing the cheshbon, working out what it is, and even doing that alone is a kiyum, a chelek of a kiyum of the anhoga of Maaser Kesofim, midin Maaser, and then you're able to keep that. That's a shidduch brought down in the Tzedakah Mishpat. There are others to say that you can be mekayim that Maaser by giving to an oni, and then the oni can give his Maaser back to you. That's kind of an alternative way. But yes, in broad terms, there would be not a significant obligation, even within Maaser, to give more. I would want to point out two things. That there are certain lavim, as we know, that apply in Hilchos Tzedakah. Lavim of loy sikpoits, lav of loy sa'ametz. At that point, it becomes a little bit less clear in relation to an oni comes collecting to your house, to you in shul, and you have and you are an oni. Are you mechuyev to give? Do you have a patur then at that point on loy sa'ametz and loy sikpoits?
But Rabbi Katz, before you go forward, I would like to ask you. You state that there are shittas who hold that an ani has a chiyuv Maaser. So I didn't see. I'm honestly not an expert in this like you, but I do know a little Hilchos Tzedakah. So if you look in the Mechaber in Reish and Aleph, and actually in the Ramat of Kat and Gimel, the Ramat says Parnosas atzmoi kaidemes l'chal adam. Ve'enoi chayiv laseis tzedakah ad sheyeh loy parnasasai. V'achar kach yakdim parnasas aviv ve'imai. So he says clearly that your parnasa comes before anybody else's. Charity begins at home in the strictest way, that you shouldn't be out there giving money to other people when you're struggling. So how do the shittas that hold that there is a chiyuv Maaser, even on an ani, juxtaposition that, or together with the Ramo, who says very clearly that parnasas ha'atzmei koidem l'chal adam ve'nei chayiv lasei tzedakah ad sheyeh lo parnasasai. How would you?
So one approach could be is that the din of Maaser Kesofim is different from the din of tzedakah. So absolutely l'kula alma, as you were saying, that in the din mitzvah deraisa of tzedakah, the deraisa dikachiyah of tzedakah for an oni is potter, as you correctly pointed out, and it's possible. And said according to only one or two shittahs, the Yosef Oimitz has brought down tzedakah Mishpat, goes into quite a detailed analysis of this situation. But because the Feuer is quite different between the hanhoga of Maaser Kesofim versus the mitzvah deraisa of tzedakah, so therefore there can be different chiyuvim there. So what you're just quoting there from the Shulchan Aruch could well be that the din from a tzedakah perspective, not necessarily so from a Maaser Kesofim perspective.
And you say this is a minority opinion that holds this way?
This is a minority opinion, yes.
Because I'll be honest with you that, when the Shulchan Aruch says a halacha and somebody says, well, parnasas atzmech koidem l'chal adam, right, in Hilchos Tzedakah, and then to say, well, that's not referring to Maaser Kesofim. It reminds me of the story. They say there was a Litvak. He was learning Zohar HaKadosh, a real echte Litvak, and it says, Ha'hoylech dalad amis belina tilos yadayim chayiv misa. So this Litvak scratching his head. Ha'hoylech dalad amis belina tilos, that's impossible. So he takes out his pen, he writes a little star, he writes on the side, V'hu shegam kein harages hanefesh. Right? So when the Shulchan Aruch says very clearly this, and an Achron says, I'm sorry, but this doesn't include Maaser Kesofim, it just makes me raise my eyebrows, because in effect it's saying that the Ramah is not negei halacha.
I think as a general point, point noted, as a general point, the set of halachas that we see, and if you look at, say, very much the kind of in the Derech Hamunah, in the Tzedakah Mishpat, in many of the Achronim, including the Chavetz Chaim as well, one needs to be quite clear in terms of which are the halachas that are being brought down in Hilchos Tzedakah, and there are separate sets of very similar, but you see many nafkaminas between the Maaser Kesofim Dik Hanhagas versus the Hilchos Tzedakah, and the relationship between them is in itself a machlokes. Whether the din of Maaser Kesofim is at all related to Hilchos Tzedakah in the sense of that is the midah beinani in Hilchos Tzedakah, or it's purely entirely its own makoy from a sifri, right, which is the Aser Ta'aser, and that kind of provides its own set of chiyuvim that may have therefore different halachas from what we're seeing in Hilchos Tzedakah. And again, by being mine in these things, you will see that there's kind of different approaches taken, and one needs to understand the different halachas between these two points.
I understand that, but respectfully, if the chiyuv tzedakah, which is a daraisa, right, to $3.20 a year, the Ramah says on this chiyuv, the Ramah says parnasas atzmei koidem l'chal adam, on a minig, to say that we have to be more machmer on the minig than on the daraisa sounds like a chiddush to me.
And there's many examples of where we do see that. As I mentioned before, Choshen is very clearly in the sense that yes, you're potter, but nevertheless medin the minig, and it's a strong minig, clearly according to some, that chelik is also deraisa. If I can read out for a second, just the Gaon talks about Uleman Hashem shetafrishes achroimish kaset shivitzicho val tifchasi kasher hizaticho ki bepochas mizeh oivim kol rega al kamalavim va'asim v'shokul ki ilu kofa b'toy b'akdoisha. So there are some who learn that even that choimish is medin medin deraisa, but according to the Roy Poiskim that is a minig, but it's a minig that is all the way back from the obvious coming forward. And yes, we do see there are different halachas that need to be thought through and applied. So this Choshen line of one should still be muffish what you should calculate and be muffish and make a note of it so that you can repay that later is not a din that you'll see in Hilchos Tzedakah. It's a din that comes out from the Anhog of Maaser Kesofim.
Okay. Now, you go to a school and you get this all the time, or you don't go to a school and in the mail you get a beautiful brochure, Chinese auction. So you go ahead and you spend, X number of dollars on the Chinese auction for your school. Is that tzedakah, or is that Maaser, or is that, if you buy lottery tickets, you're getting value for your money. That's not Maaser. How would you define that?
Okay, so let's deal with the simple case first of all of a straightforward lottery. So there we have broadly three different shittahs: Derech Emunah, Shevet Levi, Yerushalayim Zalman. In terms of if one uses Maaser Kesofim money to purchase a charity raffle ticket, and they discuss it from the point of view, if you then win, what happens to that winnings? Yeah, so the Derech Emunah approach is that the winning actually therefore belongs since you bought the ticket using Maaser Kesofim money. Therefore, Maaser Kesofim is what has won that amount. Therefore, that would come back into your Maaser Kesofim account, which then needs to be distributed by you. The Shevet Levi says you can keep the winnings. You personally can keep the winnings as Mom and Kollel, but of course you need to take Maaser Kesofim on the winnings that have occurred. Yerushalayim Zalman is probably the most machmir in the sense of that actually the money needs to be given straight back to that moisid, and that owns the winnings. So that's from the point of view of if you are using Maaser Kesofim money, then what happens in the situation that you've won? From the other perspective of can you use Maaser Kesofim money in the first place? And broadly, I think your summary there is correct. If outside of any Tzedakah and Chesed calculations, you are making a commercial decision of is it worth me putting this amount of money into the lottery to be able to win the £100,000 or the car or whatever it is, then if that's what the commercial value is of that lottery ticket, then you can't use your Tzedakah money to buy a commercial value. If, on the other hand, the true value the true commercial value of that lottery ticket, taking into account all the chances of winning and the value of the winning, turns out to be only 1 cent, right? But you, because it's a Tzedakah thing, you're going to give $1. So at that point, the 99 cents would clearly be considered as a Maaser Kesofim.
Okay, so let's talk about what are priorities in Tzedakah. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch obviously brings priorities, but if you give, let's say, to a Kiruv organization, how far does Maaser expand? I mean, there are so many different Maaser mitzvahs. Try to give us some sense of both priorities, and in your opinion, or what the Achronim say, is there anything that you think would be very weak to take from Maaser? Give us some type of parameter. Right,
okay, so it's an absolutely crucial question, and probably one of the triggers behind writing the Sefer, because as a Baal Stocker, you're kind of faced with the myriad of stockers coming to you all day long and making decisions, and especially if we kind of quote from the Torah, Al Kain Tzorech Adam Lizoy Ma'oid Litna Karoi, right, the chiyuv that is on a person in terms of being really careful. It's a very unusual lashon of the Torah. Tzorech Adam Lizoy Ma'oid Litna Karoi clearly shows that one needs to take a very careful approach in how one distributes. It's not simply whatever one feels is the right thing to do. The lashon of the Rama, likewise Ma'oid Tzorech Lizoy Ba Yosef Mikol Mitzvah Say. So this taking a serious approach to how does one distribute one's Maaser Kesofim money is a very serious question. So let's kind of talk this through. So some of this will touch upon what we've already mentioned earlier. The mitzvah deraisa of tzedakah is a mitzvah that k'mat l'kula alma, the mitzvah deraisa is for aniyim only. So from that perspective, the chelek of Maaser Kesofim that you're giving, and let's initially talk about someone who's giving only 10%. When I say only, it's obviously a very nice thing. If somebody can give 10%, if they can give 20%, that's even nicer. Let's just deal with the person who's able to afford to be able to give 10%. So from that perspective, when giving 10%, there's I would say broadly a machlokes between kind of the Chofetz Chaim and many others on the other side. The other side say that 100% of that first 10% needs to be for aniyim only. Now, aniyim, they can be split into two categories, aniyim and aniyei Torah. So we just described before, people in Kollel, most Klei Kodesh, etc., will fall into the aniyim category, and at the same time also fall into the Torah category. So there's a milah from that perspective in the aniyim, but the first 10% broadly, according to many shittahs, should be entirely for aniyim only. The Chofetz Chaim seems to be, in his Avos Chesed, seems to be matir, it's very interesting, that even in your first 10%, you're allowed to give up to 1/3 of the 10% can be given towards the mitzvah of Chesed. And let's be very clear, the mitzvah of chesed, as you know from the Gemara and Sukkah, the mitzvah of chesed is wider than the mitzvah of tzedakah because it applies even to non-aniyim. So the Chofetz Chaim, fairly uniquely, is matir up to, of the first 10%, is matir up to 1/3 to go to chesed activities, which is even not aniyim. But let's deal with the basic principle on the aniyim side. And as we said, there's that can either be the local welfare, that can either be broadly any kollel. On usual cases, we fall into the aniyim category. The stipends that they're giving out are usually only to the talmidim, to the Avrohom, who are unable to afford, a little bit questionable. If their parents can, then they should really be gover from their parents and not gover from the kollel. It's kind of a separate complication. But that is the first kind of category, and that way you fulfill the hanhoga of Maaser Kesofim. You likewise fill the Beinani Midah in Hilchos Tzedakah, which is an aniyim category. Once you move on for that, then the next madrega, as the Chofetz Chaim I quoted before, highlights the next madrega is chesed. So that can be up to 1/3 of the 10%, Lefi Shittas of the Chofetz Chaim. And as soon as you're talking about your second 10%, that means if somebody's now able to afford to give not just Maaser, 10%, but actually Aser Taser, the second chelek, which according to the Shittim Mekabetz is closely modelled on Maaser Oni on one hand and Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni on the other hand, then the second chelek, your second 10%, that's got a wider definition. So number one, obviously that would include any chesedik and yonim. It would likewise include any situations such as Torah learning, which we'll come back to in a second, for even non-aniyim. So let's say from that sense, a kiruv organization, they're being makarev lav dafka aniyim, right? Clearly not, right? They're being makarev whoever they can be makarev. So in that sense, the Maila it's for Amelis for Torah, for bringing into the world of Torah learning. But the downside is it's not Aniyim.
Well, Rabbi, respectfully, Rabbi Katz, I have a question for you. Would Pidyon Shvuyim fall into the area of Aniyim?
So Pidyon Shvuyim has got its own separate Makoy for being on top of all of this. In Hilchos Tzedakah, being on top of all of it. So something which is Pidyon Shvuyim, then that clearly trumps all, because that's already... So then my question,
because the Gemara in Basra, it has din of Hatzalos the Fashis.
Yes.
So my question to you is, the silent Holocaust occurring in our generation of assimilation and intermarriage, right, which in America has reached like 60 or 70% by the non-religious, could very likely fall into the gather of Hatzalos the Fashis. I think the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Vav says you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos in that case, the way the Taz learns and the Nachal Shiv, etc. So could the argument be made these Kiruv organizations are saving lives, and therefore Hatzalos the Fashis, which we learned from the halachas of Pidyon Shvuyim Basra, I think it's Yudam at Beis, rises to the level or even higher level than Aniyim. If they took the position, I'm sorry, it's Hatzalos the Fashis, and therefore we fall into your first 10% of Maaser. How would you respond to that?
Yes, it's possible. I think Walmani, it's a good to hair into what is the role of Kiruv organizations, and is that a din of Pidyon Shvuyim? It's possible. I can imagine a Poisik turn around saying that yes, this would be classed fundamentally as Hatzalos and Fashis. So I can't. It's possible. I'm not sure.
I have a question for you. It's always bothered me that when it comes to investing, you would hope, even though many people aren't, people do serious due diligence before they invest. I mean, if they want to invest their retirement, I mean, there are many people who obviously fall for Ponzi schemes and are not financially astute. But assuming many people are financially astute and they're careful who they would give the retirement to, who they give the investments to, they would check out the reputation, they would do some due diligence, they do it to a fund who has a good reputation. And when it comes to a Maaser, they say, Kala Paishit Yadai, don't ask any questions. And it's always bothered me, why do we take Hashem's money, Kavayachel's money, God's money, less seriously than we take our own money? And as somebody who's written a sefer, I'm curious, where do you fall out on this?
Right. So I'm going to do the interesting response of quoting from one of your other guests, from Yosef Fleishman, who I had a lot of shaykhs with when preparing my sefer. And in fact, in his Mitzvah Brocha, I'll read out to you a suitable response. Based on besides the actual halachas, there are important lessons that one can derive from this sefer. One lesson is that there are halachas of how one should allocate his tzedakah. Most people allocate their tzedakah based upon their personal predilections, much as secular philanthropists do. This sefer teaches that for a Jew, this is not an issue of personal preference, but genuine halachic issue. So one needs to take a very proper halachic view of how one is allocating one's money. And from that perspective, that applies to all aspects of it. So at the aniyim level, at the moistus level, at the kolim level, etc. On the other hand, let's be very clear, the lavim are there as well. So come what may, if there's an oni in front of you, something must be given. That can be as low as a gregarious, which is, who knows, 25 cents or whatever it is, at that kind of level. But in generally, giving more than that minimum should be done with thought and care, because there are very clear halachas how one needs to allocate and distribute. And when the Chaim turns around and says that at least 2/3 of your 10% must go to our niyim, and overall at least 50% must go to our Meilei Torah, that needs to be considered very carefully, and sit down, calculate, and work out across the year, how am I distributing the money, which, as you rightly pointed out, is what Hashem was given to you in your achrayas to be able to distribute in accordance to the correct halacha. So thought needs to be given, yes.
Rabbi Katz, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing your new sefer here in America.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
We have the honor of having with us from Eretz Yisrael on the line Rav Avrohom Chaim Feuer. Rav Feuer was the Rav for many years in Miami of Chaim, and then he was Rav in Monsey of Beis Avrohom. I live in Monsey, and he was quite a legendary Rav while he was here. He's also a prolific author. He's written many Sfarim for Art Scroll. He is the son-in-law of the Telzer Rosh Yeshiva Zechron Levracha, Rav Mordechai Gifta, and today he's Rosh Yeshiva in Ramat Beit Shemesh in Mesoras Mordechai. It's an honor to have you with us, Rabbi Feuer.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Rabbi Feuer, we wanted to ask you some very, relevant Shailos and Hilchos Tzedakah, and we've gotten from our audience, they've emailed in a number of Shailos that we'd like you to discuss. And Tzedakah is something that, almost everybody, Balabas, Yeshiva man, young, old, is something that we're constantly, it's at our doorstep on a daily basis. It's in shul, it's at our homes, it's almost wherever you go, by a chasana, etc. So I'd like to ask you, many people ask this question. I've gotten this from 2 or 3 people, and here's the question. I can't afford to buy houses for my children, yet I'm constantly approached by people from Eretz Yisrael collecting to buy homes for their children. Do I have a chiyuv to give them?
Okay, that's a very good question. It is a common question. Let me just preface by saying that the Rambam, at the beginning of Hilchos Maaser, you might say, asks the question, what mitzvah, of all the Taryag mitzvahs, do we have to be most meticulous about more than anything else? And the Rambam says we are obligated to be more meticulous in regard to fulfilling the mitzvah of tzedakah than we are with fulfilling any other positive mitzvah, I'd say, from the Torah. So there is a chiyuv to be very, very careful with tzedakah and to know what we're doing, and people really should be well informed. The answers that I'm going to be giving you today are from my sefer on tzedakah called a tzedakah treasury for Art Scroll, and all the details are there, and they will just give so much, shall we say, a cursory overview and some tidbits from the sefer. So I'd like to preface with a very important general statement about tzedakah, that once we understand this, we have a whole different perspective on how to give tzedakah. It comes from the Parshat Tzedakah is in Parshas Re'eh, in Perek Tez Vav, that's the Devorim Perek Tez Vav 15, from Pasuk 7 to 11. There it says in Pasuk 7, the very first Pasuk, it says, if there shall be a destitute person amongst you, here we have 2 words, from any of your one brothers, from any of your cities. 2 separate categories here. This explanation is from the Netziv in his Hamek Dover there on the spot. He notices over here 2 separate categories of tzedakah. One is called Me'achad Achecha, the other is called B'achad Sharecha. And it continues, Ba'artzecha asher Adonai lehecha nosein lecha, lo sa'ameitzes levavcha, you shall not harden your heart, v'lo sikpos es yodcha me'achicha avyon, neither shall you close your hand against your destitute brother. Says Netziv that the two categories, the two actions at the end of the pasuk, they correspond to the two categories in the beginning of the pasuk. In other words, first we have me'achad achecha, one of your brothers. In reference to him, it says at the end of the pasuk, lo sa'amis es levavcha. When he's your brother, then you shall not harden your heart. The second category, which is b'achad sharecha, in the gateway of any of your cities. So corresponding to him, it says in the Torah, lo sikpos es yodcha me'achicha avyon. You shall not close a fist, clench your hand from your destitute brother. What does that mean? That means that there's the ikar tzedakah, there's the main tzedakah, and then there's an auxiliary tzedakah, a secondary level of tzedakah. Let's go to the secondary level first. The secondary level is when someone just pops into your life out of nowhere. They just show up in your gates. Here I am, knocking the door. We're coming over to you in the street or in the shul or at the chasna. It's b'chad sharecha. You don't know him. You have no shaykhs to this person. This person is going to collecting anywhere and everywhere. There's no obligation to check him out. You don't have to have a whole checking system for this person. It's impossible. How can you check him out properly anyway? So what you do is over here you follow the Gemara Bava Basra. The Gemara Bava Basra, Daf Ches, says that Oni you give him a matana mu'etes. And Oni, who's going around at all the doors, him, you have one obligation. It says in the Torah, says in it's Testament Aleph, 9a, the Gemara says, in reference to the Oni who goes from door to door, there is a pasuk in Tilim, Perek Ayin Dalet, 74:21. It says there, David HaMelech says, Al Yashov Dach Nichlam, do not turn away empty-handed, he whose spirit is crushed, lest he be put to shame. So therefore, it's required that you open your hand to him and you lay sick place as yotcha, give him something. Don't embarrass him. He has come to your door. He has stretched out his hand to you. So this tzedakah is not the real tzedakah, the rehabilitative tzedakah, where you're taking responsibility for somebody, where you're doing something real for somebody, where you're opening up your heart and your home to this person. No, not that. It's impossible. Every person who comes to your door and knocks is not shaykh. So on this secondary level of tzedakah, someone, a stranger, comes into your gates. This person, the Torah says about him, don't clench your fist, give him something. Don't embarrass him. Al Yoshov Dach Nichlam. Don't turn away the empty-handed, the person whose spirit is crushed, lest he be put to shame. That's the secondary tzedakah. I call it defensive tzedakah. The primary tzedakah is the beginning of the pasuk. Pasuk begins and says that the main tzedakah is one of your brothers. A brother means somebody who you know, somebody you have some level of achrayas for. You have a shaykh with the person. You have some knowledge of the person. He's a brother. Means on the same level as you. He is not known to be a poor person. He hasn't taken the mask of covered off of his face. He's not going around collecting by other people. People don't even realize he's a poor person, and he's trying to preserve his dignity. He's still a brother of yours. He's somewhat on some level of a peer like you are as well. So when it's achecha, someone you know and you're close to, you have a shaykh to you, and he's a chosh of a person still. Doesn't mean he's a person with dignity. So that person is trying to preserve his dignity. Of him it says, Lo sa'ameitz es levavcha. Don't harden your heart. This person, you have a chiyuv to open your heart up to him, listen very carefully to his story, and see if you can help him in some way, and you help him in a more meaningful connection. You get involved with this person more, based, of course, on the level, different criteria that you have to look into. So
charity really does begin at home, then.
Charity, yes, it does begin at home. Of course, it's to everybody. So the fellow, getting back to your question, this will answer a lot of questions. So the fellow said, so it doesn't make a difference what he's collecting for. If you don't know who the person is, there's no charge to this person, and now he's going around the entire world, you have no special chiyuv towards this person. He said the whole world is his pushka. So this person, you give him a complimentary donation, whatever you decide in your life you're going to give him, And there's, of course, the people who come every morning to shul, I call them the sweep, and they're coming by. So you give them whatever you want to give, the minimum amount that can buy something with. I don't know what did it say in America? A quarter. That's fine. You can buy something with a quarter, and that's fine. That's all you have to give them. If you want to be, I don't know, if somehow it looks a little more choshev and you want to be, so you give them, sometimes it's hard, someone comes to your beautiful house. That's the problem we have. They're coming to my doorway. I have a lovely house, and I do have money, and they're coming, but you're not, honestly, it sounds brutal maybe, but you're not mechuyev to listen to the whole story, treat them with dignity. You can keep them by the door. I mean, you don't have, if they're sweating, and sometimes it's dangerous to invite them into the house. You don't know who the people are. Your wife certainly shouldn't invite them in. Your kids certainly shouldn't. They don't know who they are. So you want to bring a glass of water to the door? Fine, whatever. You'll decide what level of security you want to maintain. You give them a minimum donation just to be so that you're not ignoring them. And now I'll tell you a chiddush I told you of Chaim Kanievsky Shlita, but it's such a big chiddush that I just somehow didn't want to put it into my sefer yet. I had to sleep over it a bit, and that is, he's masking to me. Reb Chaim, that it says, Oni ha-choyzer la-psachim, the Gemara says, which is brought down in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't say Oni ha-choyzer la-tzedakah. It's Oni ha-choyzer la-psachim, which means if he comes to your door, if the Oni made the effort to come to my door, and even doesn't know my name, but he knows there's somebody living here, he made an effort to walk those extra steps, or took the car with the driver to my house, no, he's choyzer la-psachim. He's making a special effort to see me, so I have to give him something, not to embarrass him. But he's tam choyzer la-psachim in the streets. I don't know who he is. I'm walking down the streets of Yerushalayim, certainly by the Katz. I don't know who he is and what he is. Or he's coming to a house, or coming to shul necessarily. I don't have to give him anything, really. It's only a choyzer la-psachim. We made a specific effort.
Here's another question. Who do I give to first? A Kollel or my son's school? This is from Avrohom Rosenbaum from Flatbush.
Okay, well, this brings us into a whole new story called priorities in Tzedakah. Shulchan Aruch Yeridea has a long list of priorities in Tzedakah. However, let it be said that the long list is that there's various qualifications about this long list. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Nigros Moshe Yeridea, Chelik Aleph, Siman Kuf Mem Dalid, says, a big chiddush, that all the priorities in Shulchan Aruch for the priorities are only for a gabbai tzedakah, where it's not his money, and he has no right to make decisions on his own where the money should go to. But however, if it's individual, personal, private person give his own money, he can. This is a suggestions for him. For him, it's saying, this is, if you don't know exactly what to do with your money, here's a list of priorities what you do on the Yercha first, and different things, and your relatives first, etc. It's a long list. It has to be gone through. But if you know what to do with your money and you want to give it to specific places, so you have tovas hanor. Moshe emphasizes tovas hanor means benefit of gratitude, which means that when you give truma, l'mashal truma and mais and other matnas aniyim, you can give it to the kohen that you want. Here too, you can give your tzedakah to whom you wish to give the tzedakah to. So you can determine the priorities. When it's a gabbai tzedakah, it's not his money. He's collecting money generally from the olam that Yeshiva kupas tzedakah. So there, when he's being approached by people, he can't make his own decisions. What's good for what he likes and his own family. But if it's my money, then I have tovas hanor, a benefit of gratitude, and I can give according to my list of priorities. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky told me also, he said, although it doesn't sound like that in Shulchan Aruch, he said it's suggestions. It's not dafka chiyuv.
Which is
and
interesting.
Reb Palm had discussed this with Barichas as well. And Reb Palm told me he based this on a netziv in the end of Parshas Shlach, where it says about tzitzis, so there, he has a whole arichas there, the netziv, that you have everybody has their own heart and their own eyes, and in general in life to decide things that are not clear in the Torah, priorities or focusing. There, every person has their own right to decide. Everybody chooses the mitzvah that's his. Some people want to be atzala. They're consumed with atzala. I couldn't do atzala. I just can't do atzala. Some people are consumed with learning be'iyun and the Gemara. Some people are consumed with b'kachaylim. You know what? This is a gift of God. It's a message from Hashem. Hashem says, yes, fine, get into Hatzalah, get into Bikur Cholim, get into Chesed Shel Emes and bury people, whatever you get, Zaka. Everybody has their thing. And some people, and even in Torah says the Netziv, some people are Lamdanim and Lumdis in the Gemara, some are into Psak Halacha, some are into Agadata, some are into Kabbalah. Everybody should follow their heart and their eyes, and it's perfectly legitimate. And Reb Palm told me based on that therefore in Tzedakah as well, every person should follow their heart. Again, you shouldn't be exclusive and neglect everybody else, but there's a general statement I'm making. Everything has to be qualified very clearly, and I try to discuss it in my Tzedakah Treasury more at length, that generally speaking, you can emphasize what the yeshiva you like the best, and the message you like the best, or the stuff you want to give lots to Tzatzalah at the expense of a yeshiva. Okay. Again, according to Moshe, it's my private money, I can do what I want. And even according to Palm, not emphasizing much of the Moshe point, everybody has their own heart and their own eye.
Now, would you extend that to, let's say, family too? Like, can you give your kollel or your son's school before family?
Absolutely. Your own family? Yeah, again, you can't neglect your family. Again, the details, I don't want to be nailed into this details, but the general rule is generally yes, a person has a lot of leeway to decide what's appropriate for him. This is old question. What's more choshev in general? If I don't know what to do, I don't know if any kids should I give to Yeshiva Katana? To a cheder or a day school like we call in America, or should I give to Kollel? What's more choshev? Advanced education or elementary education? Without anything to do with my family, or I like the Rosh Yeshiva. That's an interesting question. This is sudden lakan, and Reb Moshe has the place that the Kollel is taka very choshev. Even though you have to have day schools, but Kollel require a lot of chizuk. But that's in a general way. But if it's me, my son's yeshiva, which is struggling, and I'm not paying his rebbeim, then I have every right to say that I know Kollel is very, very choshev, but I have a moral responsibility to my own son's rebbeim and the menayel and the school.
Here is a question from a listener in the 5 towns. Is it appropriate to not allow collectors into a chasana I am making for my son, as I find that they disturb the wedding and it is just in bad taste?
That question I was asked many times. I did research on that, trying to remember, but personally I would be a bit loath to do that. Even though in shuls as well, the same question. I told you that Chaim said clearly to me that from the beginning of brachos till the end, the last kaddish after shir shel yom, everybody is pater from giving anything because you're being osek the mitzvah of davening, and you're pater in a mitzvah of giving tzedakah. And in my shul here in Eretz Yisrael, in a rather affluent neighborhood in Shari Chesed, we have droves of collectors every day, mama droves, and more every day. And it could get disturbing, etc. But I would not recommend making rules against that, chas v'shalom, because tzedakah is very important for davening, before davening, and it's very important that you shouldn't give it after, because kriyishma, it's going to stare your kriyishma. And I personally just give very little during davening. There might be 40 collectors. I just give a few of them. I don't want to be. They expect something from me already because we're old friends, so to speak. So I give them a half a shekel. But during davening, it's an absolute distraction that bothers me. But I'm not going to ask for them for coming into shul. You can't do that. And a lot of people like to give during davening. It doesn't bother them. So you can't enforce such a thing. And saying by a chasna, we were toying with the idea to say a sign on the outside that there'll be somebody outside by the door handing out dollar bills to everybody who comes. But again, that's really a bizayon. I'm not sure. That's a bizayon to the niyam. Give them $5, $10. It's introducing a whole new level of. It's not shayach. So you have to look at the aniyim as a gift from the Rabbi Shalom, as I state in the Zohar and Paz Vayakel, that every time an ani comes to your door, it's a gift. It's a deirana. As the spot what I told you, I'm not being mezalzel on the ani achazel apsachim. It is a gift to the Zohar Kodesh. You don't throw a gift out of your life. And there's a pasuk in Kollel which says, "Tein chelik l'shiva, the gam l'shmona." Gift to 7 and to 8. Rashi says there in Kollel that it means that if 7 aniyim came to your door and he gave each one of them a gift, and then another squad, another sweep of another 8 come to your door, don't say I gave enough already. Don't say, Rashi says, no. You know, you have money now, you give it to them right now. No one says you give a fortune. and you should be happy because today you have the money to give to them, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And sometimes there might be a need. You need a lot of zachiyas. You know, a lot of zachiyas, and you'll be happy that you gave to all 15. These will save your life. So give it now when you have it, because if you don't give it now, what's going to be later? Give it, give with joy. No, again, small matana, small amount, but don't be annoyed that you gave too much or they're bothering you in your house. During davening, you have this p'tur of mitzvah, so that mitigates. You can ignore them during davening. Yes, you can ignore them. They're bothersome. But a chasna, I'm having a good time, and we're spending a fortune on lavish chasna. That's gaiva. They say, I don't want to have these kind of people coming around. That's not nice.
Now, the Mishnah Berurah does bring in Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah that Isaac b'mitzvah patam and a mitzvah. He brings it interestingly during Kriyas HaTorah, not by davening, but you're saying.
Well, the Chaim said to me the whole davening.
The entire davening.
Entire davening, which it's true. It is a shter.
Now, as an expert in Hilchos Tzedakah, could you give our listenership what prioritization you would recommend? Like, for example, you have, there are so many needs. You have the Rabbi, and then you have people coming around and they say, without day schools, you have kids would be, we would lose children. You have the kiruv people coming to say we're losing 80% of Acheinu Beis Yisrael. Give us some sense of prioritization as an expert in this topic. How should we be prioritizing? The Shulchan Aruch said a 500 year ago prioritization. How would you give for the 21st century an American person? Give us some sense of prioritization.
Honestly, first, I'm not an expert, and I certainly don't have Ruach HaKodesh. I will stick to the Hiroah that Rabbi Palm gave me, based on the Netziv. It's a pasuk in Kollel. V'halech u'darkei libecha. That if I give my mice, I separate my mice from my Shemesh. I want to give it right. I think a person should think about it. We sit down with our accountants every year to figure out our expenses, and we have meetings in our businesses about budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. Tzedakah, at least, the Rambam says you have to be more meticulous with tzedakah than any other mitzvah. Got to sit down, figure out what my income is, a projected income for this year is, and figure out what I want to give and where in general. Nothing's engraved in stone. And I have the right to figure out my own priorities. I love this particular Kollel. I happen to love the Rosh Kollel. I want to help him out. That's fine. Doesn't mean it's the greatest Kollel in the world, but for me, it's all from God. God, he was Meitzeh Chaim Ba'einai. Certain Rosh Yeshivas come to me. I like them. I want to help them that take the burden off them. So if I help them out more than I give others, that's okay. Because tzedakah is the most subjective mitzvah in the world. There's no, there's much clearer halachas how to buy a pair of tefillin and how to buy an esrog. But by tzedakah, it's very subjective. It's not objective. Sometimes a bundy comes, you say he looks too slick and too rich. Sometimes a bundy comes, he says, he's such a schlump. I don't like this guy. It's very subjective, to tell you the honest truth. But as far as the priorities and where a person should sit down, discuss it with somebody else. Maybe it's just with people come to me as a Rav. I was very honored that people came to me with their tax reports. They came to me with their income reports. Said, Rabbi, the Rav should know this, how much money I make a year. Can you help me figure out how to allocate the money in a proper some general level of what's appropriate? That's very smart. You sit down with your accountant and your CEO, sit down with your Rav.
But that's the amount. But if you had to give us a klal as to, you say...
No, they ask you where to give also. I would tell them again, I don't have their heart. Their heart is their heart. I think kiruv is very, very important. I'm into kiruv. But again, I have a big priority for the yeshivas of my children or grandchildren. And some of the yeshivas, I know that there's a lot of other people. I give it to whatever. I have different cheshbainis, and I have the right to have my cheshbainis. And Hakar Zatayv is a big subject. The yeshiva where I learned, the yeshiva my children learn is very, very important to me. And I have Hakar Zatayv to these places. It's fine.
So you're saying the message is that you're saying tzedakah is very personal, and everybody has to give it where their heart speaks to them.
Of course, you can't give exclusively to your own family or exclusively to your own kids' yeshivas. You have to be honest, and you have to be legitimate. and legitimately think. But you got to think about it. You got to sit down and think, what is my? I'm not going to give it like spur of the moment. Don't come to my door. I get a call from the yeshiva. Boom. Let me think about it in advance. I told you, to this day, this Balabatim will call me up, and they ask me these Shailos. And Moshe Feinstein used to always klug sich. He said, people ask questions about the kashas of bubble gum, and they ask them about the kashas of this, whatever, this product, and they don't ask them questions about Maaser. Reb Moshe was very pained by the fact that in Hilchos Maaser, no one was asking questions. That's essentially why I wrote the Sefer, It's Tzedakah Treasury, because of this reason. It hurt me also to see how people throw their money away in a very haphazard fashion.
That's a fantastic way to close. I really like to close with that's just an amazing comment. Rabbi Feuer's point is, he says, people ask the kashrus of bubble gum, but on tzedakah, which is one of the most important mitzvahs we have, and it's really the fruit of so much of our effort and labor, we do it in a haphazard way without carefully setting time to think about where do I want to give my tzedakah, how do I want to allocate my tzedakah, how do I get the biggest bang out of my tzedakah dollar, and we don't give that adequate thought. I think that's a very beautiful thought, Rabbi Feuer.
You're very welcome. And allow me just be Messiah. You mentioned about being browbeaten. The minute somebody comes to your door or whatever, and they put pressure on you, and they're really pushing you, they got to give me. That's one of the biggest red flags that something is not beseder. Because Shlomo Melech, people ask me something, Rabbi, do you have Ruach HaKodesh? I say, Shlomo Melech gave us the key. Shlomo Melech, the wisest of all men, said, Tachanunim yidaber Rosh, v'osher yane azus. The poor person speaks with pleading. He's asking nicely and gently and sweetly. Tachnunim. It's not brazen faced. For Ashir, but if he's really an Ashir, really he's okay. Really, Yasher Azus. He speaks brazen faced and with chutzpah. So the minute someone acts that way and pushes you and pressures you, you can give them your quarter and say goodbye. Zaygebenched.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Feuer. It's really been an honor to have you on the phone.
It's been an honor to be on here. Thank you very much. Kol Tov B'Matzliach. It's a wonderful program.
Thank you so much. Take care.
The winner of the last riddle, of the previous riddle, is Rabbi Hill Katzenstein, listening from Columbus, Ohio, and here's his answer.
Rav David, it's Hill Katzenstein calling back. I just listened to part of your show on about the Holocaust. So I think the answer to your riddle is Pashut, because Yom Kippur is the only fast right now that is not for a bad thing. For Yom Kippur, I mean, we fast, but other than that, it's a pretty good day. Mechila, Slicha, Kapara, we fast because we're Malachim. So I don't say it's Agav, but yes, the Torah says Nisam is not Shtechem, yes. But the point is not to afflict yourselves. As the Gemara says, maybe because you should go out of your way. Different examples of Gemara gives. I'm blanking on the spot, but there are different examples the Gemara gives in Yuma that perhaps you should put yourself in the Torah. Limits it to the things that the Torah that is specified in the Psukim. But apart from that, it's not a sad day. It's not a mournful day. Ashein came all the other Tanasim, if we were to go through them, were days where either we're in Avelos, like the Shabbat, like Shavas B'Tammuz, or days that we're remembering something that was something sad. Even Tainus Esther, Purim is a very happy day, but the tshuva that had to come before it was because of a very bad decree, and we remember that in the tshuva process, which was caused by us fasting. So that's not a good thing. That's not a happy thing. That's remembering something that was very sad, that was very unfortunate. And therefore, halacha dictates that when it comes to something which is not happy, we don't go out of our way to eat extra. Of course, the person has to make sure they're not together. They have to make sure they're eating and drinking. But to go the extra mile, to be marvelous Suda, is something which usually has a happy atmosphere, connotation, something that's positive. So we wouldn't do that if it was something that we're mourning or something that's unfortunate, sad, like the other 6 Tanasim.
Well, this was an important program, Tzedakah. It's something that happens to us every single day of our lives, and I hope you learned from it as much as I did. This is David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila. Until next week.